Welcome to the Financial Advisor Success Podcast, where you go behind the scenes with financial planner, speaker, and consultant Michael Kitces to hear stories of how leading financial advisors navigated the inevitable challenges that arise on the path to success and get insight from leading industry consultants about how to break through to the next level in your advisory business. And now here's your host, Michael Kitces.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the 377th episode of the Financial Advisor Success Podcast. My guest on today's podcast is Meredith Moore. Meredith is the founder and CEO of Artisan Financial Strategies, a hybrid advisory firm based in Alpharetta, Georgia, that oversees $77 million in assets under management for 120 client households. What's unique about Meredith, though, is how she was able to keep her firm open, navigating through and ultimately growing to more than $1 million of revenue, despite a diagnosis in 2005 of a 7-centimeter glioblastoma tumor in her brain, resulting in several years of major surgeries, radiation treatments, and chemotherapies, all while continuing to see and serve her clients. In this episode, we talk in depth about how Meredith has met the multitude of challenges she's faced over the past 17 years head on and found ways to navigate Artisan to ongoing growth despite those trying times. How Meredith decided to amplify her ability to grow the firm by hiring early before she even had her first $200,000 in revenue in the interest of staying ahead of the company's capacity, which ultimately jump-started a faster pace of revenue growth for her. And how, after a period of bad hires, Meredith pivoted Artisan's hiring process by leaning into LinkedIn ads and more clearly articulating both what the role needed to succeed and what a prospective candidate would really need to be able to do in order to move up and grow with the company in the future. We also talk about how Meredith's realization that women who out-earn their male partners are more apt to involve those partners in financial decisions than men would be led her to focus on her own advisory niche on women senior executives and women entrepreneurs who are household breadwinners. Meredith's whirlwind experience in being accepted as a speaker for the TEDx Women in November 2022 to talk about couples dynamics with money, and the shock of having her talk cut from 2,000 down to about 300 words to deliver for the event itself, and then having to redo the entire talk a second time on the day of the event. And how Meredith, inspired by Dory Clark's Becoming a Recognized Expert course, has leveraged her TEDx talk as social proof for her expertise and further leaned into expanding her network of potential clients through a Luncheon series, each connecting 6 women in high-level leadership roles in the area who would meet and talk through a series of 3 simple questions that Meredith provided in order to connect with one another. And be sure to listen to the end, where Meredith shares how she struggled in knowing how to really run an advisory practice like a business due to the lack of mentors around her early on, and is now much more mindful of the types of fellow advisor business owners she surrounds herself with. Why Meredith still feels like her practice is in a chasm of potential death because of the unique challenges that arise in hiring and scaling up an advisory firm as it crosses $1 million of revenue and the staff infrastructure that has to be built to keep growing through that phase. And how, despite Meredith's surprise at how hard running and growing an advisory business still is after 17 years, she's been able to keep growing by trying to constantly evolve and improve her hiring process to find and put the right team members in the right roles that the business needs. And so with that introduction, I hope you enjoy this episode of the Financial Advisor Success Podcast with Meredith Moore. Welcome, Meredith Moore, to the Financial Advisor Success Podcast.
Thanks, Michael. I am so happy to be here. This has been a BHAG of mine for a long time.
Oh, awesome. I appreciate it. I'm so glad you're willing to join us today and talk about what I think is one of those challenging issues for so many of us as advisors that sort of looms beneath the surface, which is the industry likes to put the mega firms up on the pedestal where there's like a zillion advisors and all these teams. The overwhelming majority of us, though, are on our own, either literally just us, or maybe there's 1 or 2 administrative and support staff team helping us. Our clients are our clients, and we're the only ones that can serve them. And on the one hand, that just creates some pressures around capacity, the infamous challenges for a lot of us of, I want to go on vacation, but apparently I still need to be available in case they need to do an emergency trade. But then there's the next layer of, what happens if I get sick? What happens if I get really sick and have a serious health issue? And I know you have been through one of the more extreme versions of that someone can go through and have navigated through it and are now here on the other side with, I'm sure, a lot of perspectives and lessons learned along the way. And so I'm just appreciate you're willing to join us and talk about this really sticky issue of what you do and how you handle these situations, or even prepare for situations of, what if I get really sick as an advisor and I can't work for a while? I can disability insurance my income maybe, but if no one serves my clients, there's not going to be anything to come back to at the end. So how do we deal with major health events when we're trying to be a financial advisor?
Absolutely. So I want to lay the groundwork. For me, was I felt like I had this metaphorical successful life, graduated from Georgia Tech, literally right after graduating with an undergrad in industrial engineering, started my practice at 23.
Okay.
And like every young advisor, I think you and I have been in the business around the same time. So this was like 98,
Okay. Yeah.
97, 98.
I started just a year or two after you. Yep.
And you win all the awards that are seemingly important at that time, and rookie of the year and blah blah blah. And so I felt like things were going really well, and I had gotten married and everything seemed to be perfect, if you will, and didn't have any problem. We didn't have any problems getting pregnant, and I had my son on April 14th, 2005. And right after having him, I started getting headaches. And I don't mean, okay, the client's calling, this is a little headache. But I went to 3 different physicians and kept telling them this. And I was getting blown off as postpartum headaches
Okay.
because I had a newborn at home.
Right.
And finally, couldn't see a neurologist as a new patient for 90 days. And so the fastest way to the CAT scan was through the ER. So went to the ER, and they're like, and by this point, I'm 30 years old. I have a newborn at home. And the ER doctor's like, I'm so sorry, you have a 7 centimeter anomaly. We've paged the neurosurgeon. We're admitting you right now. And I told,
7 centimeter. That's
so
sizable. An
well,
anomaly, air quotes.
right. Well, for all the men out there, size doesn't matter when it comes to brain tumors. It's all about location.
Okay.
I mean, you could have the largest brain tumor in the world, but if it doesn't affect mobility and sort of functioning, it doesn't matter as much.
Okay.
We didn't know any of this at this point. I knew I was having major headaches. And basically, I left that ER because my mom was sitting in chemotherapy, by the way. She talked to her oncologist, and she's like, I wouldn't bring my dog to that hospital. So I left, went to go see a neurosurgeon here in Atlanta, which is where I live. And that guy's like, well, we don't know if it's malignant or not, but we need to go ahead and do a craniotomy, get in there and see what's going on. And so that's what I did. So literally the first surgery in my life was a craniotomy. Or excuse me, it was a C-section, then it was a craniotomy. And mind you, before I went to Tech, I went to Rice University and I was a Division I swimmer. So again, I had done well. I was an athlete. I was doing triathlons, and this was just like out of nowhere, out of left field. And that's why I really wanted to set the stage. Like, you have all this quote unquote success. This is the success podcast after all.
Yeah.
And then bam, like your world gets rocked. And that kind of diagnosis with brain tumors, I mean, you could have benign brain tumors and they can be in a bad place and it's not good. And we didn't know if mine was benign or malignant. And so they did my first craniotomy, which was, again, brain surgery. They literally saw your skull open. They get in there and they take stuff out. Thankfully, my grandfather was the COO of the largest pathology group here in Atlanta, and his team was sitting in the operating room with microscopes. And basically, the slides showed at that hospital, as well as MD Anderson at Duke and UMass and a couple other big brain tumor centers, that it was very malignant. It wasn't a little malignant. It was a granddaddy of all of them, what's called the glioblastoma, which is what had killed John McCain and Ted Kennedy. And so a lot of high profile people you may have heard have had this. And so typically a long-term survivor is considered 5 years. Most people do die within 2 years. And if you can't get a good surgery, it's very difficult for people to survive that first years.
Because it's just so aggressively malignant that it tends to spread
N-
quickly and do bad things quickly.
No, think of it like tentacles. The
Okay.
problem is people can't get it out.
Okay.
Because the tentacles are spread in different places, and when you start removing parts of the brain, that's bad.
Right.
And so it's lack of being able to get what we call a full resection. And the problem with where mine was located was it backed up to what's called it was in my right parietal lobe, and it backed up to my motor strip. And having had been an athlete, they were very nervous about how to resect it without me losing mobility on my left side.
Okay.
So I did the first craniotomy here in Atlanta, and have a lot of thoughts about physicians. That's another podcast, though.
Uh-huh.
So they got the first one done, and because the pathology was so bad, my then husband had slides sent again to multiple other centers. Duke ended up offering me a clinical trial. Remember, I'm 30.
Yeah.
I've got a 6-week-old son at home, and at this point, my mother-in-law has moved in. So it's all sorts of fun. And my mom is dying of breast cancer at this point, too. So lots is going on in Meredith's house at this point. So
Yeah.
Duke offers the clinical trial. We literally pack a suitcase and drive up to Durham. And so the first thing the neurosurgeon tells me, and by the way, neurosurgeons are a special breed. Love them, but they do have a very special personality.
Uh-huh.
But the first thing they tell me is you need to redo your resection. And I was like, what? We had been told that this was an aggressive resection. They were as aggressive as they could be. And we were told that the majority had been taken out. But the way they framed it, Michael, was they started with, who did your first surgery? Well, in this business, we all know that if like another professional says something like that about somebody else's work, that's not good.
Yeah. Yep.
That's not good. And so,
That's usually not, because it's so amazing. I just want to know how they did it.
right. Yeah, that was not the case here. I can assure you of that. And so they said you need to redo it. And so I thought I had hit a low point before. I hit an all-time low point now. And I thought, well, this is a surgeon. He just wants to cut, like thinking of our industry. He's just
Right.
trying to sell me something. And so we went and got a second opinion at MD Anderson. And MD Anderson told me the same thing. They're like, who did your first surgery? You need to redo it. Now,
Oh.
oh yeah. Well, Duke and MD Anderson had a different way of approaching stuff, but I will tell you, Duke, they were way more hopeful, and nobody said, I'm so sorry. Like, I kept hearing, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm like, I'm not dead. I'm not
Yeah.
dead. I'm a big girl. I've dealt with a lot of stuff in my life. I've survived this business we're in. Let's figure this out. I'm 30 years old. And we ended up deciding to go to Duke ultimately. And with Duke, I had to redo the craniotomy. Now, get ready for this one. I redid the next one awake. So I had an
Wow.
awake brain surgery that lasted 6 hours. And because of where the tumor was, they had to wake me back up and talk to me because they wanted to make sure they weren't hitting my motor strip. And so the big joke, and I'm still friends with all the oncologists and surgeons up there, but the big joke is still, I tried to sell the surgeon long-term care insurance in the middle of the procedure.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Woohoo! Thank you for all the people out there that write insurance. So
Fantastic. Because what are we now? We're 2005. So yeah, all the big players are still active.
Yeah.
Genworth's still got a thriving policy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we did that, and then I got the first good news that I had really gotten since June 1st was when I had originally been diagnosed, and Duke's got a clean resection. So they were able to fully remove it. But the problem with glioblastomas is because they are so aggressive, you might not be able to see cells. And so that's why people are so cautious. So in answer to your original question, the reason that most people die is because you can't get a full resection because
Okay.
of location. In this case, they did. And then we followed it up with then I had my third surgery, which was a clinical trial where they infused a drug into my brain while I sat in Duke's neuro ICU and pondered the meaning of life for the better part of 5 to 7 days. Meanwhile, I have a business, to your point earlier.
I was going to say, so what was the state of the advisory firm? I mean, I think you said you started late 90s. This is 2005. So
Yeah.
you're 6 or 7 years in. So what was the state of the advisory firm at this point?
So to that point early on, I was primarily doing transactions and more on the insurance side. There was some BD work, so there were some retail funds. I had just started charging fees the year before and affiliated with the RAA. And that was even ahead of my time relative to my peers at that time, having affiliated with an insurance BD and an insurance RAA. So I was charging fees at whatever age that was for us, 25, 26. But it was still early on, and I didn't have a lot of AUM, and I had to.
So you're a traditional life insurance BD, so I'm assuming like the bulk of your business then is good old life disability, long-term care, maybe some variable universal life.
Yeah.
At the time, some whole life.
And charging at that point in 2005, $500 to $1,000 in a planning fee.
Right.
And I may have had at that point, again, I was so early in the industry, maybe 3 to 5 million max. Right. So nothing that could sustain the practice and pay for the staff that I even had then.
Yep.
I lost a staff member through this too. Well, we can get there, but to go back to the medical piece. So after I redid the cranie, full resection, did the clinical trial, got out of there, then we had to move up to Durham. Okay, I had to move up to Durham to do radiation. I did a lifetime dose of radiation to my brain. So if you want to talk about intense, awake craniotomies are hardcore, but go fry your brain for the better part of 6 weeks. Meanwhile, I've got a husband who's very angry. He's angry at the situation. There's nothing he can really do to help. Yep. And we would go to the Duke's Radiation Center, and there would be people, I'm like strolling in with the stroller. There'd be people chain smoking outside. I mean, it's North Carolina. People are there getting treated for lung cancer. And I mean, I was pissed. I mean, it was very frustrating. Like
you're coming as like D1 athlete, have done everything to take care of myself, and here I am.
Right. With a baby.
Yeah.
No less. And they would put the family members in one waiting room, and then they would put 4 people in the radiation machine waiting room, and everybody's dying. And the conversations that were had in that small room, Michael, were so intense. And it's hard for people to understand the intensity of those conversations. In fact, this crowd will also get it because somebody started talking about essentially what's the equivalent to the living benefit rider or the accelerated benefit rider on a life insurance contract. And I was like,
yes, I need the money for my care now. I'm not dead yet. What's my family supposed to do?
Well, literally, this person was dying of prostate cancer and had been for a while. And I heard that you can do this just sharing. That's the conversation with other patients. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I know a little bit about this. You're sharing your expertise with 3 other people. But so I waited for my machine every day, 5 days a week for 6 weeks to get my brain fried. And then we would do that routine and then back to the corporate apartment in Durham and trying to pretend like things were normal. And I would call the office, call my staff. I did have another agent or 2 that still to this day I'm very grateful to. They would see clients that I needed to be seen and do some transactions. And they were so kind that they would give me much more of the percentage than I probably really earned at that point, more than origination essentially. And so at that point, I'm not an established advisor at this point, but I needed some sort of revenue. That being said, my husband had good income. So it isn't like we were destitute or anything like that.
Okay.
And this was the summer, many people can relate to this. This was the summer of Hurricane Katrina.
Okay.
And every weekend we'd drive back to Atlanta. We didn't have to do that, but we did that back to our nice suburban home in North Atlanta to try to pretend like things were normal. And then we would drive back up 6 hours to do it all again. Ultimately, I ended up, after I did all the radiation at Duke, and I did that there because I had done the clinical trial. I did chemotherapy in Atlanta under Duke's instructions. And so I worked through that. And that's where you could also say back to this whole thing is a metaphor for this business. Sometimes we go through tough times and we have to figure out how to navigate around it. And I would block my calendar. I knew specific days. I'd be praying to the great porcelain goddess with doing chemotherapy. And that's just what it was. But I was seeing clients. I was on disability claim at this point because my revenues had gone down and I couldn't see people at a fast enough pace.
Because, of course, as a good young agent, you wrote disability insurance on yourself in your early years.
There you go. There you go. And it's very difficult too, I'll say, because a lot of us don't have high net income early
Right.
on. And so one thing I'd say to everybody, I don't care how long you've been in the business. I don't care if you have a bill to an AUM. Our income is our biggest asset. And sometimes we forget how that really is set up and what the impact will be. I knew enough about those contracts because I began my career writing a lot of it, and I never went on full claim. I was always on residual claim, meaning I got a percentage based upon
Right.
my percentage of loss with the profit and loss.
Right.
That was helpful, but again, my husband made good money, so it didn't put us back, but it definitely, my production went down. And thankfully, New York Life was kind and generous enough, even though I didn't make contract numbers, like not to say, see ya.
Right.
So they took a bet on me in that respect. And I was able to get back to things, and I had a great story around this. But where it starts really getting messed up is my mom passed away of breast cancer amidst me in the middle of chemotherapy. And oh yeah, it was really intense. Now, I will say I grew up with her being sick since I was in the 6th grade. But it just, I mean, there were so many, again, whole nother podcast to really go into some of this. But it was very intense. And then I went through a very contentious divorce not a year after that. And so, ironically, people are going to say, "What are you talking about?" But the divorce was emotionally harder than any of the rest of it. It was terrible. It was terrible. And it was just a very intense time. And I ended up leaving, is what happened. I had to figure my business out. And ironically, after we split, my business started growing very rapidly. And it wasn't because I had left. There are a lot of things. What's the phrase? Correlation doesn't equal causation, or even vice versa. But I was able to really start growing that business a good bit. I hired my now integrator COO in my practice around that time, and been at it since, and it continued to grow from there. But those 3 years were very tough.
So I'm just trying to visualize the timeline here. The diagnosis comes June 1st.
Yep.
So
And by the way, I still celebrate that every year. I freak my friends out. I have a thank God I'm still alive party on June 1st.
I think it's well earned. So the diagnosis comes June 1st. So how long is this cycle of the brain surgery and second and third, and then the heavy dose of chemo? Like, how long did this portion run where you're in just active treatment, knocked out of commission cycle?
Yeah, so the first surgery was in 2005. The second surgery was a month later in 2005. I went through chemotherapy in 2006, but my production started coming back a little bit. And that's when the radiation was in 2005 as well. My mom also died in 2006. So that was very compact. And my divorce really wasn't final until like early 2008.
So as you're going through this cycle of the brain surgeries and the radiation, the chemo, were you completely out of the firm? Were you like still trying to do some things to
Oh, I was
work
seeing
with team,
clients.
or so you're
Oh,
still
yeah.
seeing clients?
Oh, I'm running a calendar. I'm just not working on the days that I'm barfing.
Wow.
Oh, I'm hardcore. Like, I'm still competitive to this day. In fact, the neuro-oncologist at Duke totally gave me grief. I still remember when we were doing the consult, when they're like, "Hey, you need to redo your surgery." I was like, "Well, what about my clients? I need to see clients." That's what I told them. I'm still like, "What was I thinking?" But
That just because the nature of the business, particularly at that time, was so transactional. It's like my income's zero if I'm not seeing my clients. Like I have to see my clients.
yeah, I did. I feel this obligation. I think a lot of us do to our clients, and we care about them. And I knew that they would support me, and they did, but it's just how I'm wired even now. We have to shut the business off sometimes, and I still was thinking about it then. And that's when the neuro-oncologist is like, "You need to focus on your health right now." I was like, "Okay." So there's a lot of things that were happening in that time that really made me reflect back.
So did you tell clients, like how
Yeah.
much of this situation did you communicate to them?
I did, because actually my assistant quit on me while I was amidst radiation at Duke.
Because
And
she's just not sure if there's going to be a job here much longer, like
probably,
that
I don't know.
dynamic.
Yeah. I mean, she was getting paid. It's just, yeah, and I wasn't there to oversee stuff. And I don't begrudge her that, but it was just one more thing to deal with at that time.
So how much do you communicate to clients? How far down that path did you get with them?
So when I would get an email or like a phone call, I would have one of my agent friends deal with it. They handled it for me.
So then which parts are you seeing? Because you said you were seeing clients through some
Okay,
of
I
this
thought
as well.
right, absolutely. So
Yeah.
once I was amidst chemotherapy, I'm running meetings normally. I'm just not
Okay.
running at the pace. And this was like amidst chemotherapy, but amidst the surgeries and radiation, that was where I was just doling emails and calls out, because that's what we weren't texting in
Right. Right.
2005. So that's where I had friends handling stuff for me. But 2008, I was seeing clients. I just couldn't run the calendar that I had been running before.
Okay. So I guess indirectly one of the benefits of being in large term insurance environment, there's lots of agents in a local office. Like there are other people to call upon to help
Yes, but
support.
I'm a little discerning from a skill level, is a nice way of putting it, who I wanted to do that. And there's a
Mhm.
gentleman named Andrew Hill, and highly competent guy, and I trust him implicitly, and he did a great job. And a lot of people, just by nature of this crazy diagnosis from a client standpoint, were willing to sit on hold for a bit if they needed to, as long as things weren't completely falling apart. I didn't have a complicated business at that point. Certainly not to the degree that I do now.
So you said as you came out of this on the other end, like business was starting to grow and tick up. So what, because I'm just wondering more like what was going on? What was changing? What was new Meredith on the other end of this that was making it grow in new and different ways?
I think the world of becoming the kind of advisor that I wanted, I felt like I was more open to doing it. Remember, I had just affiliated in 2004 and started charging. At that time, again, compared to other advisors, wasn't a bad planning fee. I was charging $500, $1,000.
Yeah, I mean,
And
that was sizable
well, it
20
was then.
almost
Yeah.
20 years ago. Yeah, like
Yeah,
that.
it
Yeah.
was. And especially given that I was, 30 years old, that was a decent size fee.
Yeah.
And so I was really able to start running from there and without distractions, relatively speaking, in my personal life and things like that. So I started growing my AUM a little bit and started seeing bigger clients. But really, I'll also say I had growth, but not what I think of now as substantial growth. Within the environment that I was in, I had good production, so to speak, but ultimately, over time, I needed to be around other people so that I could really get much bigger production, see bigger clients with bigger problems. I do have a bit of a technical side, again, having an engineering undergrad. And while we don't judge her, my COO, she has a civil engineering degree from Clemson. So you have two analytical women running the
Hmm.
practice. And I think with hiring her, that was my next big step to be able to grow things and really thinking about people differently in my organization.
So, do you recall where where your production was, where revenue was at this point as you're starting to do this hiring and reinvestment?
So here's what I'll tell you is I remember when the markets went down in 2008, it didn't impact me because I had enough insurance as a percentage in the practice to overcome the 37 to
Right.
50% loss in AUM. And I thought, well, damn, like diversifying revenue streams, I'm just brilliant. When in actuality, I just didn't have a lot of AUM is really what it came down to at that time.
Oh,
So maybe 200, maybe
okay.
200 of rev, maybe less than that. I've always, as an individual, I've always invested a lot back into my business. Like year 2, year 3 in the business, I hired an assistant because I always believed that I had the luxury to take a loss because at that time I had a husband who had good income and I thought I could grow my revenue faster the quicker I hired. And so
But
I've always wired like that.
well, that's part of what I was wondering. You said earlier you had a spouse's income, which helps to keep the household stable while you're reinvesting in the business early. By now, I think the divorce has happened, so you have to make reinvestment decisions as single mom at this point.
Yeah. So I had a partner at this point,
Okay.
but she wasn't earning anything. So there was one income. There was
Okay.
one income, which kind of also leads, I know we'll get there around the niche. So I had not been the breadwinner in my first marriage, and I was in my second relationship or marriage.
Okay.
And so that also gave context to what we do. So, yeah, so I had to figure it out. I didn't take home a lot, but I was motivated to grow things because I definitely had a vision. I've been listening to you from the get. I remember when Matt Oxley started really doing a lot of stuff on how millionaires hire advisors. Tom Stanley, who wrote
Yeah.
Millionaire Next Door, I mean, he lives in Cobb County right here in Atlanta.
Right. Right.
And so I have been studying all of that early in the industry. I became really fascinated with practice management. So I just happen to be an entrepreneur, but that just is an advisor right now. And so I have been very committed to putting stuff back in the business, even if it meant not living in the big idyllic suburban metaphorical house that I had been when I was in my first marriage.
So, what does the business look like as you're now going through this stage? I mean, it sounds like the A side is still very small, but that's where you're focusing the growth.
I've always been, and I've always identified as a planning practice first, always. And I know listen to you long enough, and I know from personal experience, my margins are not going to be what all my friends are that are just running money, or even
Mhm.
those that are like just writing massive life insurance. But fundamentally, with who I am as a person, I was running and still am a planning shop first. So the financial planning fees were always critical and still remain very critical to the P&L, because it always started there. I'm not the person you call if you have a rollover or if you want to write a term policy. I can send you to somebody that does that. But we're doing the plan, and then the implementation, of course, is an offshoot of that. And that's how I've always been wired.
So what were you doing to start, I guess I think of it like moving up market? I mean, you said you were getting bigger clients with bigger problems. Is there something you were doing to make that shift?
That's a great question. It was organically happening at this point until about 5 years ago, when I started creating minimums. I should have been doing some of those things before, but I was consistently getting the 250, half a million, $100,000 account, and then did a lot of that, but was still doing planning agreements and had terrible margins around it. But I was doing at that point what I thought that I loved. And then I would have ancillary insurance annuity products to meet what I knew to be like revenue minimums to hit thresholds that I created for myself. At this point, I knew that I needed somewhere between 5 and 10 grand per household.
Okay.
And so I would back in, Michael, to, okay, if that's what I need, I'm making revenue estimates around size of accounts and then supplementing with insurance, annuity products, because in that it's still what I would characterize as mid-market, upper mid-market. So it's households that have 200, 250 of household income. So definitely not where I am now. But I mean, that's what it was. And there was more of a need for insurance products at that level. So I
Okay.
wasn't doing $1 million accounts, wasn't doing SMAs at that point. It was more wrap stuff,
Okay.
earlier on at that account size. But it was slowly, I was learning the business. I was growing. And I guess with where I was in that path, I look back and I don't have regrets, but I wish I had sought out better, because I didn't have mentors. And I have that's one of the things I talk about in business quite a bit, not just in the industry, but with friends. Like it was old white guys that didn't have the education that I have. And what they were offering was very different than who I was and where I wanted to go. And I had to figure a lot of this stuff out for myself and listen to stuff that you put out, stuff that Oxley was putting out. Joe Lucas is my coach now. I've been listening to him for years. And so that's how I was learning the business of advisory. And that's always what's interested me. I love being an advisor, but much less than being the business owner and how to figure this out and how to figure growth out.
So I want to come back from this sort of like goal that you knew you needed to be somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 of revenue per household.
Yep.
So it sounds like that comes back from, because I know how much planning stuff I'm doing and what it has to add up to. So then in theory, I can charge the client $5,000 to $10,000 planning fee, but not a lot of us do that. And that can be harder to do in an insurance environment. So
Well, yeah.
we're going to do whatever combination of things they need to make sure ultimately that I'm getting compensated for the depth of the planning work I'm doing. Is
Right.
that a
And
fair way to think about it?
yeah, that is. And you have to remember, this was well before eMoney and Money Guide Pro. I mean, the tech was way more antiquated, and I was having a spitball. And with where I play right now, if somebody has financial independence, it's a little bit tougher on the insurance annuity side. And I've seen that side of my P&L. It's just gone down by virtue of where I'm playing now. where then it's very appropriate. You're writing a boatload of term insurance, and
Just
yeah,
because you're
you're
actually working with younger folks still in their working years,
yes,
often still with families and children and
yep,
very traditional insurance
right.
needs.
Yeah, and how are you going to get paid on your at that time your 3 grand Roth contribution and an A share?
Right.
That's not going to pay the mortgage.
So what led to this shift that you said 5 years ago you started to create minimums?
So I'm going to back up a little bit because it leads to niching.
Okay.
Do you mind if we start there?
Yeah, please. Well, as everyone knows, I'm always game for a good niche story. So
Yeah,
please go right ahead.
sure. So I had been systematically seeing a lot of women in my practice that were out earning their male partner. And I was
Okay.
noticing on how decisions were being made financially. And if she was out earning him, she would want to involve him in the decision. We can talk about gender roles and all that stuff too, because that plays into this. And I was intrigued where it was the other way around. He wasn't as apt to involve her to the same degree. And I was seeing this over and over again. And so I happened to be sitting at my RAA's conference. This had to be 2014, 2015 by this point. And I had been receiving the newsletter for Dory Clark, who has a brilliant business mind, nothing to do with advisory whatsoever, written a ton of articles for HBR, Forbes, big speaker everywhere. And one of the books she had written was called Stand Out. And the point of the book was how in a sea of where everybody's quote unquote looks like you, how does you make your business stand out? And for whatever reason at that time, it appealed to me. And she had an online course. I'm sitting at this RAA conference and I buy an online course, which is very
Is
uncharacteristic. Go ahead.
is this because like she's speaking at the conference? Like you're hearing her on stage and saying this is
No,
amazing and I'm gonna buy her course on my phone while
no,
she's
she was
on the stage?
promoting her new course. And at that time, remember, there weren't a lot of online courses either.
Okay.
In 2010, I was ready to do something different because I knew that I needed to stand out. Like, how do I, again, at that point in time, I mean, this is what, over 10 years ago, how do I
But
really do something different?
but
And
notably, you started in the late 1990s. I mean, we're
yeah,
15 plus years into your career at this point. Like,
I
you've been doing it
am.
for a while.
Right. And even now, I'm like, why was I not so far ahead? I think about this a lot and I'm like, well, if you didn't go through those things, you wouldn't be where you are right now.
Right, right, right.
When I always look at who I surrounded myself with, why did I not seek out better mentors? I mean, again, we can sit here and ponder all day long what ifs, but I am where I am. But so I bought Dory's course, which was called Becoming a Recognized Expert. And this course was, and again, in essence, how to stand out. And the framework of her idea around this is 3 things. Number one, how to create an incredible network. Number two, creating content. Well, that sounds like old hat now, but remember, this is still 10 years ago.
Yep.
So creating content and then creating social proof.
Okay.
And so I thought, well,
Network, content, social proof.
you got it.
Okay.
Exactly. And so I thought, well, I've got a network. I graduated from Leadership Atlanta, which is the first leadership program through all the chambers. It began during civil rights. It's a kind of BFD here in Atlanta to be a part of that. And I
Okay.
thought I was networked. But I learned quickly because of Dory that I wasn't. And so I began to work on my network.
What
Go ahead.
what was wrong with your network? Like you were in Leadership Atlanta. What
Right.
was not networked about the network that you thought was networked but wasn't?
There wasn't enough. There wasn't enough
Okay.
because I hadn't been seeing enough people during my career. I had been organically waiting for people to come. I mean, yeah, I had referrals and some of that, but I wasn't out there just creating crazy amounts of relationships. And so what I did was I created a luncheon series called Interesting Women Leaders in the ATL. and I curated it and I had it 2 to 3 times a month, and I invited literally senior leaders in all the big fortunes because Atlanta and Dallas has pretty much all the headquarters, it seems
Yep.
like. I invited women heads of government and heads of large nonprofits. And I curated a lunch and it started live before COVID, eventually went virtual. And I mean, I am known in Atlanta now with having the biggest, tightest women's network. And that's what I sought out to build.
So tell me more about just this Luncheon series, what you did, how you built it. So who gets invited? How do you actually get senior leaders at big fortunes to show up for your luncheon?
Yep. So we curated it, spent a lot of money with all my VAs. I had gone through LinkedIn and I started with my Leadership Atlanta alumni that I knew, and I would fill the room with that. And I didn't want more than 6 people because I wanted an intimate setting and I would moderate a series of questions.
6 people in the audience?
No, 6
Or
people at the lunch.
okay. Look. Okay, it's like the whole thing. So this isn't come for a lunch, grab from the buffet, there's some people on stage and
No,
25, 50, 100 people in the audience. It's just
no,
like the whole thing is 6 people in the room.
right. I wanted
Okay.
intimacy. I wanted to ask some questions that would allow people to connect deeply and to be able to connect after and meet people that they would never normally be able to meet.
Okay. So it's not like one person's the speaker and everyone comes to a lunch and learn style thing. It sounds like
No,
the point is all 6 people in the room are curated folks that would be very powerful to get to talk and meet with each other.
yes, exactly. And for me to meet and become a connector, a very high level connector over a period of time. I had over 300 women in Atlanta go through my Luncheon series over the course of 7 years.
So help me understand the outreach, the ask, like how does it work to get people to show up for this?
First, I started again with the people I knew, and they
Okay.
were going to come. And then we had built a list. And so we would still invite some cold people. I had an FAQ, and we made sure that we had a list of everybody that had already been. So I wanted to create FOMO. Everybody relates psychologically to FOMO. So if these people have come, I have to get there. And so with the cold people, that was the approach we took. But we also asked that everybody that participated that they replace themselves. So we created an email, so they would do an email introduction and they would replace themselves with either 1 to 3 people. So I was able to my VAs were managing all the inventory, and we never knew who was going to come to which date, but it was all, I mean, it was highly curated and just some really big names and people that over time I've become friends with. And we would ask that to keep the quality of conversation on equal footing. I didn't need them asking their mid-level manager to do it. And based on the conversations in the luncheon with the questions that I would ask, which you're going to ask me what the questions were in a minute,
Mm-hmm.
they would know you need to find somebody really good that's going to enjoy something like this and that has done a lot of really cool things.
So how long is the lunch itself? And is this traditional come for an hour,
Yep.
hour and a half kind of thing?
It was an hour. It was an
Okay.
hour. Nobody has time to do. If you're doing big stuff, you got an hour. It was a low level commitment. It's a one-time thing. I was looking to really, again, my point in building a different network around women and women breadwinners was to focus on, again, leaders and then same caliber government, heads of bigger nonprofits, and then in corporate doing big things.
And so now help us understand, like, what literally are you talking about this
Yeah.
lunch? What questions were you asking?
Yeah. So I would always first ask about personal, professional background, and I would always go first. You got to throw in all the interesting tidbits. You heard a little bit of mine in the beginning of this.
Yep.
There's other interesting things about me too, by the way. I'm not cancer chick, and I don't ever want to be labeled that. So we would start personal, professional background, and then we would talk about the biggest win that they had had the previous year. And then the final question was the big goal that they had on their board for the year that we were in, what they were trying to do, and what the rest of us could do to support them in that. So you get to really intimate stuff very quickly. And what was so fascinating was not just the physical lunch, because all this was during COVID too. I found a tech called Circles, CIRCL.es, that a YPO member founded that very surprisingly put everybody in literally a circle, not like the Muppet Show Zoom Square thing. And it allowed for much deeper, more intimate conversations than we would ever had live.
So what changes? Why was it so much more powerful circle video than live?
Because of the depth of the questions and that technology, I mean, that's what it's meant for. Originally, it was built for therapists and guidance counselors and education. You're not sharing screens and going through decks. It's meant for more intimate conversations. And I still, it's hard to explain until you demo it. I knew that I needed something different. And all this, I moved to Circles during COVID. I needed something different. And it just allowed people, some of the stuff that was said in there is, I mean, and you don't know anybody. So it's just fascinating to see people get that vulnerable that quickly. And I'm
So,
used to it because in EO and Forum, we're taught to do that, but most of these people were not.
so was it literally just those 3 questions?
Yep. Yep. And you got 6
Times
people.
times
Yeah.
6 people, everyone takes a few minutes for each, and an hour blows by really fast.
Oh, yeah. And then what we would do is we do a photo and put that on LinkedIn, and we tag everybody so everybody was able to connect after. And the amount of business that was done with people after was absolutely fascinating to see that happen.
So how does this turn into business for you?
Thank you for asking that, Michael. So I would send a book, an HBR book, Women in Leadership HBR book, and a handwritten note after, and would follow up. And ultimately, I'd get a one-on-one is what I would do and explain more what I do.
You've earned enough in this relationship that at least you get the proverbial at bat. We had such a great interaction. Would it be okay if we had a follow-up meeting where I could just share a little bit more about what
Yeah.
I do in case that's helpful for you?
Yep, exactly.
Okay. And some percentage of those turn into business in the good old-fashioned way?
That, and I've gotten known around women and money in Atlanta because between those asks and people just knowing, and if somebody was asking about it, I would get the referral. I get more referrals from non-clients than I do clients because of all of this that I built. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but that's how, as I really started running these luncheons at a rapid rate, that's what was starting to happen. And it still happens that way with how I've created that network around town.
So your comment earlier from the Dory Clark framework was like your 3 things: network, content, social proof. So I get the network part here now.
Right.
So were there like other things you're doing at the same time for the content prong and the social proof prong?
Well,
Or the networking thing is working so good we're just sticking with this?
no, I was building all of it. Why stop at one, right? So I continued. I think a lot of us did during COVID. We were just trying to do anything we could to get stuff out there. And so I was producing a lot of video content at that time. I haven't done a lot since, but that's when I started writing, actually. And I know you've picked up a couple of my stuff,
Yep.
but what was really interesting was I think that the nature of this business is there's definitely a math side to it. And listen, I do math well, like the best of us. But after time, it gets boring and you're using one part of your brain. And I gave myself permission to start writing again. And it was, I don't want to say exhilarating because that's a little melodramatic, but it felt really good to begin to start writing on topics that I had thoughts on. And it just became like a practice thing. And I would use that, in essence, that's content was helpful for me, and to get that stuff out there via LinkedIn. I've got a bunch of articles on Medium. I now write for Forbes. So it just became part of what I did. And I have certain days that I enjoy just going into that zone for 2 hours. And I also write my own newsletter. I don't use any canned anything. And it's named after James Clear's newsletter. So I do a 3-2-1. So 3 ideas, 2 quotes, and 1 question. And as I'm reading different things, learning different stuff, I'm able to take where my head is and get that stuff out there. So writing in terms of content became just as important to me at that time, and to learn a new skill.
So I'm just wondering, like, what are you writing about? What topics? I mean, as you're saying, just like I'm writing about things that are interesting to me. What kinds of things are we talking about?
One of my articles is called "Retirement for High Achievers is Malarkey," because my experience has been that people in senior leadership don't truly retire, especially women. They go sit on paid public boards, they consult, they maybe do a side hustle. And so things that were contrarian, I wanted to start putting ideas out, so to speak. That's one of my articles. I mean, I've got literally probably 100 different articles. I think the one you picked up was around planning in terms of living expenses. If you've made more money than your parents, and how are we thinking about
Hmm.
how much we're sending back to either families, or I'm sure many people in here have had this happen. Again, we've done better than our parents have financially. Mom and dad didn't have the assets to cover a longer term healthcare event, nor did they have insurance. So typically, the oldest daughter, it's batter up. You're going to have to start writing checks to cover care. And so, how do we think about that in a financial plan for our generation? And having family meetings and beginning to think about financially providing for our parents.
So this, I'm struck, like these are still articles, topics that kind of relate back to this working with high-powered women,
Yep.
high-powered, high-income
Yep.
women, and stuff they're dealing with, right?
Yep.
So
Exactly.
high achievers that probably aren't going to retire. You're the high earner who's a successful executive Fortune 500 and makes more than your parents did, and also happens to be the oldest sibling, which means you're the oldest daughter and everyone's looking at you when mom and dad get sick.
Right.
So let's have that conversation.
Yep. Yeah, so I was doing it with my avatar in mind, but I mean, there was other stuff that I would do, just trying to, that might have been topical. Like, I wrote a lot of stuff during COVID around women's role. I mean, a lot of us, I say us because I didn't have to do it, but had to become educators if you had young kids.
Uh-huh.
And what happened to women that had to take a step back, that might have been a VP or an SVP, because all of a sudden maybe their male spouse was working, and so they had to learn. I mean, hell, my son was taking PE at his fancy schmancy Atlanta private school online and Zoom. So it was Zoom PE.
So guided jumping jacks.
Yeah, the whole thing's comical, but a lot of moms had to do that. And getting back to the same point in their career trajectory is not going to happen when you take a year break. So stuff like that was topical to my avatar, I would write about.
And how long do you write? I mean, are you long form, like our crazy long form content? Are you like short snippets? Just I'm going to put out a paragraph to stir an idea and we move on. Like
It's
what?
longer. Yeah, it's longer format, except for my 3-2-1, which, I mean, I've got that down to a rhythm. And then when I get ideas, I try to put those on 1 Word document so that I can, when I'm in creative time, I could just batch it and crank out like 3, 3, 2, 1s at one time. And all my quotes that are in my area and where I put all my ideas, I can pull those off and figure out how to do that. So that's shorter and it's a quick read. I send that out on Fridays.
Okay, so the 3-2-1 is a weekly thing.
Yeah, I've reduced it just because we were trying to A/B test it to see eyeballs. And so we found that we got more eyeballs when I did it maybe every other week. So
Okay.
I try not to send to my email list more than 2 things in a week. So if we don't have a webinar going on that we're trying to promote, I'll push out a 3-2-1, or my VA team will.
So I get like taking these and publishing them on LinkedIn or sending them to your own email list. I think you said you're also publishing on Forbes. So how did that come about?
Well, I'm doing pay to play. So if you're going to be a
Okay.
Forbes contributor, that's a whole another animal. And I don't have capacity to do that from a time standpoint. I think I have the knowledge and the ability to write to do it, but with their finance counsel, it's a low bar to be able to submit articles. But I mean, I'm right enough to where we rarely have edits. And whatever the hot topic is that I'm feeling like I want to write about, I'll send it to Forbes and then they
But
edit
but
it
you have to pay them to
at the beginning of the
publish
year.
on the platform.
Yeah.
So what can I ask? Like, what's the cost to
It's like
do those type of
1,000.
arrangements?
It's like
Okay.
1,000, maybe 1,800. It's not a high bar.
Okay. And the appeal is just I can put this out on LinkedIn or other places, but Forbes has its own traffic, its own visibility. Forbes is still a name unto itself, so it shows well to say I'm published on Forbes. Like, is that the
that's the
like
just
that's the
social proof.
justification for the
Yep.
$1,000 payment?
Yeah, there's your social proof right there. That's one of them.
So I was going to ask about that is like the third prong here, right? So you've talked about the networking and how you built with the luncheons, the content and how you built with articles. So then what was like the social proof portion of this formula?
So I was writing for Forbes. It's doing a TED Talk, which I did, and also guest lecturing at both Georgia Tech's Scheller College of Business and Emory's Goins Way to a Business School. So I feel like I've satisfied that thing too. And Dory's argument around social proof is obviously by having some of that, it makes it easier walking in that you've done X, Y, and Z, and it looks nice in a bio before you come on as a speaker.
So you said writing for Forbes, guest lecturing at Georgia Tech and Emory. So like, is that an ongoing thing, or
Nope.
you did that at one point?
I did that at one point. And because I went to Georgia Tech, I'm still very involved over there with alumni stuff. And whenever I can give back and speak to groups, I try to do that.
I was say, so what do you do to open that door, just for anyone who's never tried to get guest lecturing opportunities?
Well, you have to know somebody and see if they're looking for speakers and see if the professors are looking for that. And sometimes there's other groups. I found this one particularly funny. There was a undergrad group called the Society of Women in Business, and these were undergrads. And so being a mom, I had my super secret spy agenda. My son at this time was a junior or senior, and he's not a math guy, so I knew he wasn't going to tech, but he had never been on the campus to tour. But I was going to be speaking in the business school, so I had him meet me over there. I didn't tell him what I was doing or that I'd be speaking or this was only women. And so he showed up there to support me, God bless, and we're doing it. And he's like, Mom, this is only girls. I was like, I know, that's why you're here. So he watched his mom do her thing on the stage, and that felt really cool for me.
Very cool.
Yeah,
Very
he was at my
cool.
TED Talk too, so that was also cool.
Well, and then that's not a light thing. TED Talk?
Yes.
So what is this and how did this come about?
Right. So this is a whole other animal. This had been on my list for a long, long time. And understanding how it works is very black box. And I did not sign an NDA on how it works, but short of that, I mean, it's complicated. They don't tell you in advance, but there's a TEDx Women franchise here in Atlanta. And I had hired a consultant before I got it that I wanted to get one, because there's people that can actually do that. They know how to apply to all the different venues with your idea. The first thing is, most people in this industry, it's not what you think. Like, you can't come in with your great portfolio idea around alpha and beta. They do not
Right.
care about that. They want something that, in fact, mine was too complicated, because I originally went in around power dynamics and relationships and what money does with that. And they're like, too complicated. But I had originally gotten in with that. And by the way, my network, there's some people that happen to be on that board for TEDx Women, and they were able to help vouch for me. So this speaks back to that framework.
Right.
My network helped me there. I got in to be able to pitch, and I pitched, and she told me, no, this isn't going to work. And so I went back to my consultant. I'm like, I got rejected. I'm not used to getting rejected except in our business. This isn't like a person with $5 million telling me no. And so she's, that's okay. This is like auditioning. Go back and do it again. I'm like, I can do that. I don't give up. Just let me get an at bat again. And so I went back, tweaked it slightly with what she had said. And the organizer, I didn't realize she had my cell phone. She ended up calling me like right after, and she said, yours is really good, but it's not going to work for this, because I think men need to hear this too. And I'm like, you're not wrong. And the next thing I knew, like a month later, I got an email saying I got into TEDx Women. And I was like, what in the world? Because she had basically told me no on the phone, and that it would be for another regular TED event. And so I was part of it. And the way TED works is, whoever the organizer is, they're going to have a theme, and then they are going to curate the talks that fit their theme. And so they're producing this massive show, and everything interconnects. And so that's what it was. And I got to tell you, and haven't done as much speaking as you, Michael, but I've done a lot. I had spoken at the Wall Street Journal Women in the Workplace series not 2 or 3 years before. I'm like, this is going to be cake. Well, what they don't tell you is there are no teleprompters. You can't hold note cards. You have to memorize every single word.
Okay.
Every single word. And they gave me a coach. Everybody had a coach. And mine got cut down from originally 2,000 words to maybe 300 words. Like, when I say the talk was decimated, it was decimated, and it got switched from power dynamics and relationships to how to have better conversations with your partner around money. And essentially, I'm being handled. And that's
so, I mean, like, your whole speech,
Yep.
your whole presentation is 300 words.
Yes. It was very
So, like,
short.
a couple
Right.
of paragraphs.
Right, exactly. But it's my coach who's reporting to the organizer. They're all meeting, and then there's 6 of us, and we're all living in our own bubbles. And then we have to go practice in front of small groups that the organizer has organized. And I come back to, it's rote memorization. What is the last time we've had to memorize anything? The freaking 3rd grade? Here's the Declaration of Independence. I don't know.
Well, I guess on the plus side, it's a little bit easier when they cut you down to only 300 words.
Yes, but still it's not. But yeah, I guess it would be. So the talk was really good, and my coach was really instrumental. And I've had speaking coaches before that I've hired, but this guy was amazing. And in fact, I'll hire him again later this year to build a bigger talk, and that's another podcast too. But the thing about it is I had to literally take off. I had to clear my calendar like 2 weeks before to prepare, because there's different layers to speaking when you have to memorize. There's the rote memorization. Now you're bringing in who you are. the hand gestures, the intonations, and they were handling my intonations, like where to emphasize. I mean, this is a very produced show. And I mean, I sat up literally in my son's room and did that thing something in the order of 300 to 400 times. Yeah, I mean, the talk was 5-7 minutes. And it was really hard, and it was an incredible, I'd put it up there in the top 10 experiences of my life. I learned a lot about myself. And then the crazier part was the talk was at the Center for Puppetry Arts here in Atlanta. And so I did it the first time, and they told me not to wear long earrings. They did, because you get the headset with the mic and the lav, the drill was speaking.
Yep.
And I didn't know it. I couldn't tell it, but apparently my earrings were hitting the lav. And so I'm coming off this massive adrenaline rush. I do the talk, don't mess up too much, but wasn't perfect. And I'm like literally recovering, coming off the adrenaline, sitting down. And they're like, there was a technical problem. You need to redo it. And I was like, do you want to redo that now? Or do you want to redo it at the very end? Meanwhile, the head of Olive Agency from New York Life and 3 SVPs have taken a private plane. They're sitting out in the Center for Puppetry Arts, knocking on the door, trying to talk to me. And I'm just a stress ball. I'm like being told I have to go redo this thing. And I'm like, okay, put me in, coach. Let's do this now. Let's just get it over. And so I redid it. Didn't get to spend time with anybody that had flown in, and nailed it. And my coach was right there in the front row with my family, so that was really fun. And the organizer, she's become a friend over time, and she's like, I got to tell you, I almost wasn't going to let you redo it. And that's actually made me mad since, but I did redo it. It worked out well. And I will tell you, in the essence of memorizing, the people at Lifetime Fitness looked at me a little strange, because there were a number of mornings that I would go in super early on the treadmill and just give my talk with all my hand gestures and the whole nine.
And so this is now like up on TED website?
Yep.
So
in
like
fact, it should be in your show notes. I sent you guys a link.
All right. So for those who are listening and want to check it out, this is episode 377. So if you go to kitces.com/377, we'll have a link in the show notes for the TEDx talk.
Yep.
So, all right. So then I got to ask, I feel like the obvious question. You get a talk out on TEDx. Does the phone start ringing?
No, it's social proof. It's in my, I know. No, that's not how these things work with marketing. So social proof is never going to bring in revenue, but I will tell you that if I didn't have some of these things, it's made me more quote unquote referable. And there are really no advisors that have done a TEDx before when I did, because the big idea is what's so hard to come up with, because it's not something that's financial advisory. It's like adjacent. It's money adjacent is how to think about it. And I had to back into some of this.
So now just help me link these together. Like we've talked about Dory's framework. There's the network, which is the luncheons. There's the content, which is the articles. There's the social proof. Just sound like it's a little bit of a blend. Like I do some of the lecturing things in the TEDx once so I can put it on the official resume and we're done with it. The Forbes stuff is at least a little more ongoing because I'm writing anyways for the content. So I may as well Forbes it for the credibility.
Right.
So I guess just try to visualize how this quite all comes together to make clients show up.
Right. So it's not tactical. It's more strategic is what I will say. And then I work the tactical stuff just like the rest of us. With client referrals, I'm out networking. I get more referrals from my network than I do from my clients at this point because of how more recently how I've started moving up significantly up market. I finished the Luncheon series. I'm getting ready to start a women's dinner series for women enterprise level entrepreneurs. I'm very involved in EO, or Entrepreneurs Organization, and I have a business advisory model that we use, not just traditional financial planning. And so with my Women Entrepreneur Network, I'm getting ready to start a dinner series called Rich Conversations.
And so same style as what you were doing already, just now we're going after women entrepreneurs instead of women leadership?
Yeah, and there were a lot of entrepreneurs in my Interesting Women Leaders Luncheon, but the dinner series is focused on enterprise level women entrepreneurs that typically are going to be above 8 to 10 million of rev.
So now bring us to present of just, so what does the advisory firm look like today of, I
Right.
guess,
Sure.
clients or assets or revenue, however you evaluate?
Sure. So I'm just over $1 million in revenue,
Okay.
and about 60% of the revenue is from AUM. 15% are in financial planning agreements, and I am on your high end. I do charge $1,000 a month on financial planning. I know relative to many people listening, it's higher, but I mean, I'm constantly sitting in CPA calls and constantly sitting in estate planning calls, and I feel like we earn every dime on that. And remember, we don't sell anything until we get done with the planning engagement. And then 25% is probably other ancillary stuff, whether it's insurance, annuities, splits with my other advisor, maybe some small retail stuff on the investment side.
Okay. So as you've grown this journey, what's surprised you the most about building your advisory business?
I gotta say, I've been surprised that it's still so hard. We talk about not just in advisory, but even in outside businesses, that 750 to 1.2 is the chasm of death. And I'm squarely in it. And there are days where right now I'm trying to bring on new advisors. And with our niche, we didn't really spend a ton of time on this, but it isn't just women, but my other advisor, it's people of color. And so he works quite a bit with Black intergenerational wealth, and we're very committed to both of those markets. And I thought that, hey, once I have the minimums that I do now, because I'm personally not working with anybody unless there's $500,000 of household income or
Of income, not
yeah,
even just assets, of income.
right, of income, or $1 million of AUM. But I'm not doing one-off transactions. It all starts with a planning engagement. And again, we're charging $1,000 a month that first year.
And how many clients now overall?
So it's almost 25 years. So all in, there's probably around 120, but truly I have about 50 that are active, that I consistently try to do reviews with and that we're talking to. You have a lot of these old transactions from 15, 20 years
Right.
ago that are paying $20 a month in term insurance, and there's just not much to do with them at this point. And what's funny is they still see me as who I was 20 years ago, and I'm a different advisor, as all of us are.
And so what's the AUM base at this point, if that's
Yeah,
like the
yeah, yeah.
center or the biggest portion of
Sure.
revenue now?
It's about 80. It's about 80 million plus or minus. It's not
Okay.
huge, but again, it's a decent size.
And so thus the chasm challenge, like you're coming up on capacity limitations for you on your own. It sounds like you've had another advisor, but he's got his own clients that are separate from this base of yours.
That's exactly right. So that's
Okay.
what we've been dealing with. And the other issue we've had, I have an integrator, so I have a COO, but we have two operations people that have reported to her. We had to bifurcate the roles because of the amount of insurance we still have on the books and are still doing. So there's an investment operations and there's an insurance operations. And the insurance ops person also oversees all the planning agreements. Where we've still been bumping up against capacity is my COO was having to run the planning. Like, she's just wearing so many hats, it's been unsustainable. And so we literally just hired a director of planning to sit in all my meetings and Adam's meetings as well to do notes and to come back and in the CRM, put that in there and assign all the activities to the team with what needs to be done. And we knew that was going to be a game changer. I mean, I'm only a month into this and it's so phenomenal. That has changed my world.
Because you just don't have to worry about capturing all that stuff and
Right.
getting it back to the CRM anymore.
Right. Well, that, and if we're on with a client, there's a little bit of theater in what we all do. And then when we're dealing with navigating in Zoom or Teams or whatever your jam is, it's like the sequence of the order of the documents we pull up and how do we tell the story. And if we have to navigate through eMoney to look at a quick scenario on the fly, there's a lot involved in that. And then, oh, by the way, make sure you capture all the detailed notes.
Right.
And details are critical for people in operations. And I don't think of everything all the time. And that's been a gap for them, is both me and my other advisor. I do great notes for an advisor, but for what they need is still not near. And so that director of planning is the link between the advisor and the operations team and can be more nimble, where I'm focused on rainmaking and just with my top clients showing up and doing my thing and telling the story.
So as the firm's growing over, it sounds like the past 10 years in particular,
Yeah.
what's been the low point of the growth journey?
So I guess it was 2 years ago. Thought we had all of our seats figured out, the seats on the bus, had new people in operations, and hired somebody to be that director of planning. And literally in a very short period of time, people were grossly underperforming and didn't know things. We completely hired 3 wrong people. And so we had to terminate 1 and 2 resigned. And the Michael, it was bad. And if that's not worse, we all have a termination story. It's like having the college tequila story, but we all have a termination story. So my termination story, there was a protein shake that was thrown on the wall amidst the whole thing, and screaming up and down, running up and down the hall to where the person in the floor below came up to make sure that she wasn't being killed or something. It was crazy. And you know what? I know a lot more about people now than I did before. We completely changed our recruiting process, completely changed how we create sort of evolution, like a training point, so that they can move up in the company and know what that looks like and what they need to be able to do from a learning standpoint. One of our core values is continuous learning. So it was really important to have that. So that was the low point, and it was a year or 2 ago. So it was tough.
So what did you change in your recruiting? What was like the big miss or lesson learned of I wasn't doing then and now I know?
Right. Didn't use a recruiter anymore because we weren't getting, I think we were just trusting that even with all the testing and everything that had been done, that would be enough. But I think by us literally doing LinkedIn ads, having more resumes to choose from, I literally would do front-end interviews. The junior advisor would do front-end interviews before it even went to the integrator or the COO. And then she would talk to the candidate. And we like to joke that she's like the CIA. She can get stuff out of people that they don't even know that they're disclosing. And then if they got past the telephone or the Zoom interview, then they would meet with her live. And she, again, like every good integrator, like the HR functions would roll up to her. And then we would just have to check that we're good to go. And I'll tell you, during that period with all those bad hires, I ran out of cash. I literally ran out of cash. And that had never happened since I was early in the business. And so we call it FITFO in my office. We figure it the F out. So we had to FITFO the situation. We got through it. We have the best team I've had in my 25-year career. And we're just always trying to evolve.
So what else do you know now you wish you could go back and tell you from 10, 20 years ago as you were earlier career?
Around mentorship. One of the things I live by is surrounding myself. The old Jim Rohn quote, you're the average of the 5 people you're around the most. And I wasn't around the right people that were building businesses that I had aspired to have. I don't know that I knew what I aspired to have at that point. But I wish I had found a mentor earlier on that was running an advisory practice like a business. Even with how advisory looked back then, I didn't have that. And because of that, I do a lot of mentoring in the industry. And God help you, if you're a woman in this industry, it didn't phase me at the time because I had gone to Georgia Tech. We used to say where the odds were good, but the goods were odd. And so I was used to being around like a 3-to-1 ratio. So I just thought that was normal, but I wasn't around what I aspired to be. And I wish I had had more mentors. And I'd tell everybody, men or women, like it's so critical in this business. And it's hard. It's still hard. Again, I ran out of cash.
Any other advice you would give younger, newer advisors, like trying to get their careers going today?
I still think hire early. I mean, that still allowed me to create a trajectory, and do not discount learning about practice management in the business of advisory. If you want to be an advisor, that's good and that's a concentration. But if you're trying to grow or want to build a firm, you better be just as astute or figure out how to create learning to be just as astute on the business side, or hire somebody that eventually that will do it. But I think it's so critical.
As we wrap up, this is a podcast about success. And just one of the themes that comes up is the word success means very different things to different people. And so you're on this wonderful path. You've crossed $1 million of revenue. The business is in a very successful place by any traditional measure. So how do you define success for yourself at this point?
For me, it's about having channels to be able to create impact. How I'm measuring impact has yet to be determined, but I personally, with who I am, I like to connect deeply with people. And that's fed me on the advisor side. The other key thing for me for success is not being bored. Again, I don't aspire to have 5 businesses like you do, my friend, but I've got to be doing other things other than just being an advisor to not get bored, and to also have fun in that process. And I feel like I've been able to do a lot of that with how I've structured a lot of speaking engagements and some of these other things that we've talked about. That feeds my soul.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Meredith, for joining us on the Financial Advisor Success Podcast.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Want even more ideas, tools, and resources on how to break through to the next level of success as a financial advisor? Check out the leading financial planning industry blog, Nerd's Eye View, at www.kitces.com, where Michael covers the latest practice management trends and financial planning strategies. And by joining the members section, you can earn IMCA and CFP continuing education credits, along with exclusive member content. Get it all now at www.kitces.com.